So once again, we have a familiar reading from Scripture. It's a classic tale from Jesus' ministry. And unlike last week, this one is not a parable. It's something that, honest to goodness, really did happen. It was not presented as a lesson by Jesus. And because this particular event was recorded in the Gospels, we can assume that it was something important enough that the early church fathers thought it was worth mentioning. So what lessons are there to be learned by studying what happened when the two sisters, Mary and Martha, welcomed Jesus to their home? Now, context is always a great way to look at Scripture. It's a great way to get meaning from it. Sometimes that means looking at history, looking and learning about the social norms of that time and that place. Sometimes it means discovering things about the culture of that time, and already there we have a clue. We'll get back to that. That already gives us a clue about one of the things, at least, that makes this important. Sometimes it means looking at the scriptural context. Where else, if anywhere, is an event recorded? If it is recorded somewhere else, what are the differences and the similarities between the stories? It's not recorded anywhere else, so we just got Luke to go on. Sometimes it means looking at the literary form of the passage, and we already touched on it. It's not intended to be a parable. It's a narrative. And what do we know about the writer? What experience or biases does Luke bring to the writing? He seems to tell a pretty straightforward story. And then we look at the language. What can we learn from the language? Because any language has baggage. All words that are used are chosen to convey a meaning, usually deeper than the one that they say on the surface. And all of these things are part of what's called the exegetical process, which is a two-bit word for studying something, gleaning meaning from it. I mentioned before looking at social norms and customs and seeing where that leads. And that figures into this. But I want to get there by looking at language. Specifically, today I want to look at the names. Because Mary, what's recorded as Mary in our translation, is rendered usually as Miriam or Miriam in the original Greek. And that's a regional name. Origins aren't entirely clear. It might be Egyptian in origin. And that would make sense given the interrelationship of the Hebrews and the Egyptians in ancient times. It might also be a simple derivation of the Hebrew word for myrrh. Well, what we do know is that Mary or Miriam has several meanings. One of them is beloved or beloved by God. Another one is the wished-for child. And another one still is rebellious. Now, rebellious is kind of interesting, and that already kind of teaches us one lesson when you touch on the social norms. Because for Mary, a woman, to be sitting at the feet of Jesus, just like a guy, tells us that she was being a little bit rebellious. Was the name chosen for that reason? Probably not, but it's an interesting little coincidence at least. Mary was doing the man thing, not the woman thing. If the man thing is sitting around while the women do the work. Now, Martha Her name appears to come from the Hebrew word marar. And I did research on this past week, and I'm not sure, so I don't want anyone quoting me. But I'm pretty sure that verb or that word means somebody who snitches. Seriously, Martha. You set aside any deeper spiritual meaning to this passage. Isn't Martha every little sister or brother who ever felt the need to tattle on her sibling? Isn't Martha like every informer in class, and every class had one, at least? Wasn't she like every little kid that would raise her hand and say, "Teacher, Bobby Joe's looking out the window, he's not reading"? But that would remind the teacher that, "Oh, you didn't give us homework." In a book where we sometimes struggle to understand the social context and the interpersonal dynamics of what's going on, this little slice of time is so strikingly modern, or maybe it's so timeless in itself, that we can all look at this and we can go, "Oh, yeah, I know exactly what that's like." We can identify with the characters. We can identify either with Mary or with Martha. Sometimes with both, depending on the time. So I think one of the unspoken lessons in this scripture is from Jesus, and that lesson would be, don't be that informer. Don't be that person that tattles on somebody else. And I think that comes as a lesson because Jesus didn't buy into it when she tried to tattle. He didn't respond to that. He responded to something else instead. I think the main lesson is the one that Jesus articulates. As Martha comes and she tries to throw Mary under the bus, and Jesus says, "Martha, Martha, Martha, you're spinning your wheels. Mary's doing the one thing you need to be doing. And here you're talking to me about all this other stuff." That's kind of timeless too. Because how easy is it for us to get lost in the busyness of life, in work or in day-to-day living, and to get so far into the weeds that we can't see or even know what that most important thing is? How easy is it to get so wrapped up in life that we forget about living life, the spiritual life, the one who's been redeemed by Christ? I get it. Honestly do. Life now or 2,000 years ago, sometimes it seems like, the old death by 1,000 cuts. Like being nibbled to death by ducks. Sometimes it seems life takes us to a place where we are just totally absorbed in the day-to-day stuff that has to happen just to tread water. And when we do that, we forget that life in the Spirit isn't about treading water. It's about walking on it. This lesson, or this incident today, was Jesus' gentle reminder to Martha when she tried to get him to tell Mary to help. No, the table wasn't going to set itself, and they didn't have takeout food in first century Bethany. The food would have to be prepared. None of the other things that ought to get done when you have company were going to get done without a little help from Mary. But that's okay, Jesus said. That's okay. Because none of that stuff is nearly as important as taking a breath. taking a break, taking a breather, and sitting at the feet of Jesus and hearing the good news. You know the old saying, stop and smell the roses? I think Jesus was saying, stop, feed your soul. Stop and feed your soul, because nothing else you're going to do today is as important as plugging into the words of hope and the promise of grace that comes from Jesus Christ. Stop all this other stuff just for a moment. Feed your soul. And this isn't just something that happens with people, it can happen with churches. Sometimes churches can get so caught up in the business of the church, you know, the admittedly important business of keeping the lights on and the rooms heated and keeping the physical being of the church alive, that they forget about the spiritual being of the church. Because when the struggle becomes, how do we pay our bills, or even how do we put butts in seats, instead of how do we connect people with Jesus, then a church is in danger of losing itself by losing its purpose. And when we as individuals get to that place where we allow the things of this world to lead us, when we allow the world to hold on to us by making us focus on all this other stuff, focus on everything but Jesus, then we're in danger of losing our purpose. Our purpose is to relate to Christ, to learn from Him, to reach out, to accept the gift of grace that's ours, just for the asking. Feeling overwhelmed by life? Stop. Take a break. Feed your soul. If you feel like you haven't done anything but tread water lately, then stop treading and start walking. Walk above the words of this world by refusing to let them engulf you. Instead, embrace this new reality that Jesus brings. Embrace the kingdom. The reality of redemption and grace that are the message, the essence of what Jesus Christ brings us. We embrace the love of Jesus Christ, it lifts us. And there are still things that have to be done, of course. There's still bills to pay and chores to get done. There's still life to face. There's still tragedies and struggles. But when we embrace the kingdom, then those things are put in a different perspective. We realize what is most important. And that is our relationship with Jesus. And it's helping others to reach out to Jesus. In the love of Jesus Christ, we find hope. And in the grace of God, we find peace. And those are way more important than all that day-to-day stuff that takes up our time.